This happened a few years ago, and I still don't have an explanation for it. It was one of those nights that start out completely normal, but leave you questioning reality afterward. It was around midnight, and I was home alone with my roommate's pets, her dog, a medium-sized shepherd mix, and her cat, a laid-back orange tabby, who barely ever made a sound. My roommate worked nights sometimes, and I didn't mind watching the animals. The dog slept in her kennel in the living room, and the cat was free to roam the apartment. I was in my bedroom, which was just off the living room, scrolling on my phone with some low music playing. Everything was calm. Then, out of nowhere, the dog started barking. Not just one or two barks. She went ballistic. At first, I figured she probably heard my roommate coming home. The front door was right at the bottom of the stairs, and the dog always barked before she came in. But I didn't hear the door open, and after a few seconds, the barking only got louder. I remember sighing, thinking, she's gonna wake the neighbors. I got up to quiet her down, but as soon as I reached for the doorknob, something stopped me. It was like a wave of dread hit me all at once. Not panic, not nerves, actual dread, the kind that feels heavy and cold. My hand froze on the doorknob. Every instinct in my body said not to open that door, but the dog wouldn't stop barking, and I didn't want a complaint from the people downstairs. So, against every warning going off in my head, I opened the door. The moment the door cracked open, that feeling intensified. It was like walking into a space filled with static electricity, heavy and suffocating. I couldn't see anything wrong, but I knew something wasn't right. I kept my eyes forward because, for some reason, I didn't want to look to my right. To the right of my door was the coat closet and the small hallway that led to the stairs down to the front door. Something in me said, "Don't look that way," so I didn't. I just looked straight ahead at the dog's kennel. She was pressed low to the ground, chest down, back arched slightly, fur standing up along her spine. She was growling deep in her throat, eyes locked on that corner near the coat closet. That's when I noticed the cat. He was standing near the couch, tail puffed up like a bottle brush, fur standing on end, also facing that same corner. His pupils were huge, and he was hissing. A long, drawn-out hiss that didn't even sound like him. I'd lived there for months and had never once heard him hiss, not even when the dog chased him. Both of them were focused on that exact same spot. I followed their gaze, but I couldn't bring myself to look at first. The fear wasn't logical, it was instinctive. I could feel that something was there, even if I couldn't see it. It was like the air was thicker in that space, like it was occupied by something invisible. The dog barked again, snapping me out of it. I finally looked toward the corner. It was empty. Just the plain wall, the edge of the coat closet, and the beginning of the stairway. But the second my eyes landed on it, my stomach turned. It's hard to describe, but I could feel something there, something cold and aware. My chest felt tight, like I'd walked into a room full of bad energy. Every instinct screamed at me to shut the door and hide. I tried to calm the animals down, but nothing worked. The dog kept low growling, and the cat wouldn't move, just staring and hissing. That's when I realized I needed to do something. I don't even know where it came from. Maybe from some ghost show I'd watched. But I spoke out loud, trying to sound firm. "You're not welcome here," I said. "You're scaring the animals. Leave now." For a second, nothing happened. I stood there holding my breath, heart pounding. Then, slowly, the dog's growl faded into silence. She stopped barking, lifted her head, and looked around the room like she was confused. The cat lowered his tail, blinked a few times, and walked off toward the kitchen like nothing had happened. The whole apartment felt different after that. The air wasn't heavy anymore. I could breathe again. I shut the bedroom door, turned on every light I could, and sat on the bed with the cat for the rest of the night. The dog went back to sleep, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been there, something that wasn't supposed to be. The next morning, I told my roommate what happened. She looked uneasy, but said she'd had weird vibes in that apartment too. She mentioned that her dog sometimes barked at the corner near the closet, even when nobody was home, but she thought it was just noise from the building. After that night, I kept paying attention. Every now and then, the dog would stare at that same corner again, silent but tense, her ears pinned back. The cat would sometimes freeze mid-step and look in the same direction, pupils wide, like he was watching something move that I couldn't see. It never got as bad as that first night, but the apartment always had that strange undercurrent after dark. I started leaving a lamp on in the living room, just in case. Eventually, we moved out. The last night I spent there, I stood in the kitchen one final time, looking at that corner. Nothing happened, but the same feeling came over me. A chill in the air, that quiet pressure on my chest. I just said softly, "We're leaving. You can stay." Then I turned off the light and walked out. I'll never know what it was. Maybe there's a logical explanation. Maybe not. But whatever it was, it didn't feel human. And it definitely didn't feel friendly. Last Friday night, I was home alone. I'm 17, and my family had gone to our cabin a few kilometers away for the weekend. My sister, who's 21, stayed behind too, but she was working a night shift. I've been home alone plenty of times, so it didn't bother me. I actually like the quiet. Our house is old, and it makes all the usual creaks and settling sounds, but after living there my whole life, I know what's normal. And I had company, my sister's dog, Bosco. He's a big mutt with way too much energy, and he barks at literally anything that moves outside. Normally it's annoying, but when I'm alone, it makes me feel safer. That night, I stayed up watching TV in the living room, lights low, Bosco lying near the glass patio door. Everything felt normal until around midnight when he started barking. At first, I ignored it. He does that if someone walks by the backyard fence or if a raccoon scurries past the deck. But this time, it sounded different. It wasn't random barking. It was sharp, steady, and didn't stop. I muted the TV and listened. The barking echoed through the house, deep and frantic, and I realized he was facing the patio door. I sighed, got up, and told him to quiet down, but when I got closer, I froze. The patio door was open. Not wide open, just 2 or 3 inches. Enough that I could feel the cool air coming in. I stood there for a few seconds, trying to make sense of it. I was sure I had closed it earlier that night after letting Bosco out. I always do. I'm paranoid about locking up, and I distinctly remembered hearing the click of the latch. I locked it again, double-checked it, and then did a quick sweep of the upstairs. I looked in every room, even the closets, trying to convince myself everything was fine. It all looked normal. No broken windows, nothing missing, no signs of anyone being there. I went back downstairs trying to calm myself down. Bosco eventually stopped barking and curled up again, though he kept glancing toward the door. I sat back down on the couch, turned the TV back on, and tried to ignore the heavy feeling in my chest. A while later, maybe 30 minutes or so, I heard footsteps. At first, I thought it was Bosco's nails clicking on the floor, but then I realized he was lying right next to me. These were slower, heavier, definitely human footsteps, coming from upstairs. The sound lasted maybe 5 or 6 seconds, and then it stopped completely. I stared at the ceiling, listening. Silence. I wanted to go upstairs and check, but I didn't move. I told myself it was the house settling, that I was just spooked from the door incident. I put in my earphones and focused on my phone until my eyes started to burn. I must have fallen asleep like that. The next thing I remember, I woke up around 2 in the morning to Bosco whining at the basement door. That was strange because he never goes near that door. The basement creeps him out, and he usually avoids it completely. He was pawing at the wood and making these low, uneasy sounds. Before I could figure out what was wrong, I heard the front door open. My sister had just gotten home from work. The second she came in, Bosco ran to her, tail wagging, completely calm again. We talked for a bit, nothing special, just how work was and that I'd been up late. I didn't even mention the patio door then. It had already slipped from my mind. We let Bosco out through the front door for his last bathroom break, locked up again, and went to bed. I didn't think about any of it again until a few days later. It was Tuesday night, and we were all watching a movie, me, my mom, and my sister. I started telling the story of how Bosco freaked out that Friday, joking about how paranoid I'd been. I mentioned how I found the patio door open a few inches. My mom just nodded, but my sister went completely still. She turned pale and said, "Wait, that same night, when I got home, the patio door was open again." I blinked at her, thinking I'd misheard. She said when she got home, around 1 a.m, she went into the kitchen to grab something to drink and noticed the glass door was wide open. Not just cracked this time, open. She was sure she'd closed it after letting Bosco out earlier that day, so she thought maybe I'd opened it. But when she asked, I told her I had locked it, from the inside. That's when it really hit me. If the door was closed when I locked it, but open again an hour later when she got home, that means someone might have still been inside the house. Someone could have slipped in through the patio when it was open the first time, hidden somewhere while I checked upstairs, and then waited until later, when I was downstairs half asleep and my sister was in the bathroom, to leave. The thought made me feel sick. It would explain the footsteps I heard upstairs. It would explain why Bosco was whining at the basement door later. Maybe the person had gone down there to avoid being seen. When my sister came home, maybe they used the noise and distraction to slip out the same way they came in. We tried to come up with other explanations. Maybe the wind pushed the door open, but it's one of those heavy sliding glass ones. It doesn't move easily, and it locks into place. Maybe one of us opened it and forgot, but we both remembered using only the front door that night. What really unsettled me is that in our small town, there have been reports lately of break-ins where nothing was stolen, just doors left open, lights turned on, things slightly moved. People chalked it up to teenagers messing around, but now I'm not so sure. The idea that someone could have been inside our house while I was there, quietly walking above me while I searched the rooms, maybe even watching me from the hallway, makes my skin crawl. I can't stop thinking about how I might have locked the door behind them, trapping whoever it was inside until they found another way out. Since that night, I check every lock in the house 3 or 4 times before bed. And even though Bosco still barks at the usual noises outside, every time I hear it now, I can't help but wonder if it's actually someone there, again, standing just beyond that glass door, waiting. When I was 17, I moved in with my boyfriend and his family. It was a small 2-story house in the suburbs outside Miami. His family is Colombian, and at the time, his mother practiced Santeria. I didn't know much about it back then beyond what little I'd read online, and I'll be honest, I didn't take it very seriously. I figured it was just another religion, something cultural, but that changed fast. His mother had a small shrine inside her bedroom closet. Candles, beads, little bowls of herbs, things I didn't recognize. Her boyfriend handled the more intense rituals. I'd see him in the garage late at night, lights off except for a single candle, mumbling in Spanish while he sacrificed small animals, mostly chickens, sometimes goats. Once, he even kept a peacock in the backyard for a summer. I thought it was just a pet until I saw the feathers later, tied together with string and used in one of his rituals. At first, I tried to stay out of it. It wasn't my business, and my boyfriend told me it was normal for them. But every night when I was alone, things started happening. He worked until 10 and didn't get home until around 11, and his mom, brother, and sister were usually out late with work or school activities. So most nights, it was just me and my cat in that house. Our bedroom was downstairs, directly under his mother's. Around 8 or 9 every night, I'd hear footsteps above me. Slow, deliberate steps, pacing back and forth across her room. At first I thought maybe she'd come home early, but every time I went upstairs to check, the house was empty. All the lights were off, and her bedroom door was closed. I'd go back downstairs trying to watch TV, and the footsteps would start again. After a week of this, I started to hear muffled voices. At first it was like someone talking far away, then laughing. Sometimes it sounded like 2 or 3 people having a quiet conversation. Other times it was a low, rhythmic chanting that made my stomach twist. I'd mute the TV, strain to listen, and it would stop completely. The silence that followed was worse. After 2 weeks of hearing it every single night, I started locking myself and my cat in the bedroom once it got dark. I'd keep the TV on for noise, but sometimes it didn't help. There were nights where the footsteps turned into scraping sounds, like something heavy being dragged. Finally, after almost 3 weeks, I told my boyfriend. He didn't look surprised. He just sighed and said, "Yeah, that's normal." "Those are the spirits my mom talks to." I stared at him. "Normal?" He said, "Yeah. As long as you stay out of her room, they won't bother you." That didn't exactly make me feel better, but I figured maybe he was right. Maybe if I just left it alone, it would stop. It didn't. A few nights later, I was home alone again and got hungry. I went into the kitchen to make something, and the moment I stepped on the tile, I heard light footsteps on the stairs. Quick, like someone running. I froze. The stairs started in the kitchen, and when I looked up, I saw a small figure dart up toward the second floor. I only saw it for a second, but it was enough to make my heart stop. It looked like a child, about the height of a 6-year-old, wearing a white dress. I ran to the bottom of the stairs and looked up just in time to see the hem of that white dress turn the corner into his mother's room. That's when I remembered the doll. His mom had this large African doll she used in her rituals. It wore a white peasant-style dress with lace trim, little gold bracelets, and a string of colorful beads around its neck. She kept it on a small stool in her closet, surrounded by candles. Sometimes I'd hear her whispering to it during her ceremonies. The second I realized what I'd seen, I grabbed my cat and ran outside. I sat in the spare car in the driveway, shaking, staring at the dark windows of the house. I stayed there for at least an hour until someone finally pulled in. It was his mom. She rolled down her window and asked, "Why are you sitting out here with the cat?" I told her everything about the footsteps, the talking, the figure in the white dress. She didn't laugh. She didn't look confused. Her face went serious. She asked me one question. "Did you follow the doll into my room?" I said, "No." "Of course not." She nodded and said, "Good. I'll make sure she knows she's not to leave the room again, and I'll make sure she understands she's not to harm you. Don't worry." That night, I didn't go back inside until my boyfriend came home. I told him what happened and said I wanted to move out. He didn't argue. He just said, "Yeah, I get it." Within a few weeks, we found an apartment and moved. I didn't step foot in that house again for a long time. We've been married for almost 17 years now. His mom still practices Santeria, and she still has that same doll. It sits on a rocking chair in the corner of her bedroom. Every time we visit her, I avoid going into that room, but sometimes I'll catch a glimpse of it from the hallway. It's always facing the door, always positioned perfectly to look out. Once, when I was carrying a plate into the kitchen, I swear I felt its eyes following me. I told my husband, and he just shrugged. He said, "It's probably just in your head." Maybe it is, but sometimes, when we visit, I'll see it in a slightly different spot than before. Not by much, just a few inches off, like someone nudged it. But his mom swears no one touches it. I don't know what I believe anymore. I just know that after that summer, I can't stand the sound of footsteps on an empty floor, and I'll never look directly into that doll's eyes again.